Well, thank you all for joining. And we are here in Minnesota. It's the University of Minnesota Extension. We are happy that you are with us. We are starting an Agrivoltaics webinar series tonight with our two panelists, Dr. Brad Heins and Dr. Clare Monlezun. And they will be discussing their cattle solar grazing research that has been going on for a few years now. And so we are excited to have them with us. And as I mentioned, we did start a poll just asking for some information about you, our audience. We're excited to have you all here and learn where you're coming from and what you are interested in and as it pertains to agrivoltaics. Tonight, we ask that if you have any questions, you just put those in the chat and we will get to them after Dr. Heins and Dr. Monlezun have presented, or should be around 8 p.m. tonight, that we will start that question and answer session. As I mentioned, tonight's speakers are Dr. Brad Heins, who is a University of Minnesota Extension Specialist, as well as professor in dairy management. And I will introduce each of these a little bit more in depth when they are pulling up their presentations. And we also have Dr. Clare Monlezun, who is a rangeland ecosystem scientist and the founder of Graze LLC, as well as the CEO of Rangeland Living Laboratory Incorporation. Our agenda for tonight, Dr. Heins will discuss the introduction and history of dairy cattle agrivoltaics, and then recap a few of the studies they've worked on at the West Central Research and Outreach Center here in Minnesota, and then discuss the future of cattle agrivoltaics at the center. Dr. Monlezun will then discuss the state of solar grazing with a review of a literature review that has happened recently, and then discuss the cattle agrivoltaic trials that she has participated in, discussing panel heights, the scale of solar, and cost effectiveness of different designs. And then round us out with the ecology impacts of solar grazing, and then we will complete with, as I mentioned, our question and answer session. So at this time, we'll have Dr. Brad Heins pull up his slides and get us started. So as he's doing so, Brad Heins is a professor of dairy management at the University of Minnesota. He conducts his research and extension program from the University of Minnesota's West Central Research and Outreach Center in Morris, Minnesota. The center there has a 130 head dairy herd that is in a certified organic system, as well as a 160 head dairy herd in the conventional grazing system. And his research and extension program focuses on best management practices for organic dairy production, forages for grazing, crossbreeding of dairy cattle, group rearing of calves, and of course, renewable energy for dairy production systems. So with that, we'll have Dr. Heins take it away.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thanks everybody for joining us this evening to talk about cattle grazing underneath solar panels. Obviously, it's been quite the interesting topic that a lot of people are talking about. Obviously, it started a lot with sheep in the past, but there's a lot of interest in cattle. And I'm going to kind of give a rundown about where we came from at the University of Minnesota and kind of some research that we've worked on, and then maybe where we're going in the future as well. So really, this is kind of our schematic what we really wanted to do. There were our goal at our research center. So we're in Western Minnesota, and we have about 300 milking cows on pasture, and we graze heifers, cows, you name it, under solar panels. But our goal was to actually utilize solar and have it be dual use and not just have a bunch of panels on the ground. A lot of people were grazing sheep, and we don't have any sheep at our research center. So the idea was, well, why can't we put cows under there? So we started that. Our goal was to actually utilize the solar energy, graze cattle, and power electric cars. And that's where we sort of have gone. We have this fast charger at our research center. So actually, if you ever come to Western Minnesota and to our research center, you can charge your electric vehicle from the solar panels that the cows are grazing under. So that was my concept when we developed this project. So let's talk about some of the solar that we've actually started. This is a picture of our research center. Kind of in the middle, you can see a kind of an H barn a little bit. We first started with solar on buildings, just like everybody else did. That's a hog barn, 15 degrees in slope. Doesn't work well in the wintertime because the snow covers all of them. So our goal was to take them off of the barns and can we put them somewhere else? And the large solar installation that we have on the right-hand side of the picture was our first one that we put up in 2015, actually. So 10 years ago. Um, we really didn't know what we were doing. I think we just put this 50K solar system about 8 feet off of the ground and built it that way without ever thinking about cows. That was not our goal at the time. We were not thinking about grazing any cows or sheep or anything under the panels. We just wanted elevated panels because we thought we could produce more solar energy and kind of get it up away from some of the corn and trees and everything else that is on our research center. So that's kind of where we went. But in 2017, we kind of had the idea of can we put cows underneath the panels? And a lot of people, especially here in the Midwest, some people were starting to graze sheep under those. And like I said before, we don't have sheep at our research center anymore, but we have lots of cows. So can we put cows under there? So this is early spring of 2019. This is the pasture actually that what it looked like before we put the solar installation in. So pretty flat, some trees. In June of 2018, we started to build it. So we probably, I would say we overbuilt the system. We were concerned that what were the cows going to do with the panels? What were they going to do with the structure? Were they going to bother it? Were they going to wreck it? You name it. So we actually cemented those poles into the ground 6 feet. And because we just didn't know. And so they are cemented in. They're probably will withstand a Category 5 hurricane if it ever came through. I don't think they're going to blow over, but that's where we went. And then we started putting the panels up. So this was our racking system that we used for putting the panels up. These are fixed tilt. They are not single axis tracking. Um, and um, on one side, at least in this picture, the lower edge of the panel is 6 feet off of the ground. So not very high. The other end is 8 feet. Uh, some of you have heard this before. No scientific reason why we picked that. We kind of went out and found the tallest cow in our herd and tried to figure out how far she could reach up and maybe touch panels if she wanted, and that was about 6 feet. So that's kind of where we really settled, and we haven't looked back, I guess. So this was July of 18. So this was obviously on a small scale. By no means is this megawatts. We started with 30 kW. So this is two banks of 15 kW. You can see very minimal disturbance of the ground. Obviously some equipment, but and where we had to pour the concrete, things like that, but the grass was still growing. And then we decided that we should put cows under there. And I only show this picture because this is what happens when it rains and you leave the cows under the panels and they decide that they're gonna stay under there during a rainstorm and they really just muck it all up. And I could not show you the picture, but I wanted to show you the reality of what happens when you don't really know. We didn't know what we were doing, so we just put the cows out there and let them go. And they didn't really bother the panels at all. Maybe the first day or two they were trying to reach them and see what it all was, but they didn't bother them. You can see that the wire is up high underneath the panels. It's in some conduit as it comes down the metal pole and goes underground into the inverters, and we'll show you those in a second. This is that fall. We didn't do anything. I didn't reseed anything. We just pulled the cows off and the grass grows back. Uh, Grass is pretty hardy and the land is quite resilient, the pasture land. So it grew back without any issue at all. But we learned our lesson. Probably wouldn't put the cows out there like that, what we did during inclement weather, things like that. So this was kind of our learning process as we went. But as we go along, you can see the cows are utilizing the shade, the solar as a shade mechanism. That is really what it is. It is for shading cows with the benefit of producing solar energy. In this picture, you see that there's lots of space between the cows and the solar panels. They're really not going to reach it. They're not going to bother it. Most of the cows during the hot part of the day are hanging out underneath the solar panels. Maybe I'll make this a little bit slower so you can maybe see it online. It's kind of a video, but you can see a lot of the wires that we have for the solar panels are up underneath, so the cows can't touch them or reach them or anything like that. There's a lot of space in between these two panels. We could actually drive a combine in between there. That sort of ulterior motives as well as what we have was to grow possibly some crops in between these solar panels, but uh, that kind of gives you a schematic of what it might look like in our design. But everything is underneath. The cows can't bother it at all. You can kind of see the concrete poles, but that's a good way of making sure that the cows aren't bothering the wires. This next picture, so this is our inverters, and that was one thing that we decided that we would do is keep the inverters on the outside of the fence. We just weren't sure. We didn't want to put more fencing inside. We kind of had the luxury that we put the solar panels close to the fence so we could put the inverters on the outside of the fence. I've seen many different places where you have to um, fence the inverters off and it creates probably a little more hassle and things like that. But we decided on all of our solar installations, and we have 5 of them here at our research center now. All of the solar inverters are on the outside of the fence. Basically, the power line goes underneath the grass here and over to the panel. So the wires are coming down. So obviously we've dug the power line 6 feet under the ground to the solar inverters. If you want to know, we monitor solar energy, obviously, here in the Midwest. In Minnesota, we produce most of our solar energy in the summertime, kind of May, June, July, and August. Not as much in December. That's probably the lowest time, obviously, because of the tilt of the Earth. We aren't exposed to most of the sunlight, so we have quite a low production of solar in December and January, but that we still produce some. So then we decided that we would go bigger. And so we partnered with the University of Minnesota Morris campus in our pasture where the cattle are, and we have a 0.5 megawatt of solar. So this solar will power the University of Minnesota campus that is here. Obviously, again, smaller scale than what we're thinking about megawatts, but this is getting larger for pasture grazing. A lot of this is demonstration. It's along the state highway, so we put this in. This is actually this is half of it, so this is 250 kW. You can see it's in kind of these different rows. There's a lot of space in between. where we can drive tractors, things like that. You could drive a mower if we wanted. We're not interested in mowing. We want to put cows there. Um, so this is kind of what it looks like. It's pretty green under there. Actually, Sabrina, our host, this was her master's thesis project with one of these solar panels. It looks a little green under there for different species. But this was the installation of how they did it, and we kept it at fixed tilt. We um, we started with fixed tilt, so we kept it that way. Obviously, we're probably moving into single axis tracking and those type of aspects, but when we built this system, that's what we used. It's 8 feet off the ground. You can see the H poles that we used. They just pounded them into the ground. We didn't need any concrete. They're in about 6 feet. We didn't need any concrete anymore. We understood that we way overbuilt our 30 kW system, so these are just pounded into the ground and have no problem. So this is how the grass grows underneath those panels, does grow quite well. It's probably a little more spacing, 20 feet between the panels, so we can drive equipment and machinery and things like that between. And obviously, like I said, we have different reasons for doing that, but there's lots of space, lots of ways that we can grow grass. We kind of built this one in two parts. You can see these are just monofacial uh, panels, at least on the first part. And then when we put the other uh, section in, we went bifacial. So you can see this is just this past summer. So this only got completed last fall. So it's kind of a brand new one. And this is cows underneath. These are actually heifers underneath the panels, being in the shade. You can see there's a little bit of dirt work there where they created, but this is after they, within 2 weeks after they put the panels up, you can see they're bifacial. Grass growth is wonderful. Lots of grass growth in the shade. Actually think the shade, the solar panels actually prevent evaporation of grass, so you can grow more grass underneath. And then in wintertime, we don't have many issues with snow on the panels at all. So we have winter here. You can see snow on the ground, but no snow on the panels. So a little bit about some of our research. I won't go too in depth, but I wanted to cover some of the basics. So we've looked at evaluating solar grazing at least with our pasture-based dairy herd. So we did this on a small scale in 2019 with 24 cows, where we allowed some cows to have shade from the solar system and some cows did not have shade. And we had 4 periods. So the cows were not underneath the solar panels on a continuous basis. So they were only in there for about 7 days. So they were rotated in and out of the shade. Then we put a bunch of sensors on our cows because we were interested, can the solar system reduce heat stress in cows? What does activity look like? You name it. So we put a lot of sensors on these cows. We also were interested in animal behavior, so we counted flies on the cows. Yes, students do know how to count flies on cows, so we counted flies. We were interested from a pasture-based standpoint. We counted respiration. So you can see no difference in fly load. Obviously, they're all exposed to the same environment and the same pasture, so we didn't necessarily expect flies to be different. There was maybe the increase in fly numbers underneath the shade, but not any statistical difference. The biggest thing was respiration rate. So, not in the morning, but in the afternoon, the cows that didn't have shade from the solar system had more breaths per minute. So which was indicative of heat stress. So they were more stressed, breathing more. So we basically have reduced heat stress in cows by having them underneath our solar panels. We also looked at hygiene of these cows. If they stand underneath the solar system, do they create a mud or a mess? There's maybe some indication that if I look underneath their belly and their lower leg, that maybe those cows are a little bit dirtier. Not much. I don't know much of a difference between a 2.9 and a 3.2 on the lower legs, but there's maybe something there that if you leave the cows underneath the solar and don't provide them a lot more space, that they may be a little bit dirtier if they're manuring and because they're hanging out in the shade during the hot part of the day. We didn't see any difference in milk production for these cows. Obviously, milk production was not our goal, anyways, at least with this study, because the cows were only underneath the solar system 28 days out of the 150 grazing days. But we were really interested in heat stress and how we could reduce body temperature of cows. And you don't see much overnight, but really during the hot part of the day, that's where we reduce body temperature. So about a half a degree Fahrenheit to 1 degree Fahrenheit, we've reduced body temperature. That's quite a bit. That's really significant for reduction of heat stress in cows. And it was really in the afternoon from noon until midnight, really, is when you see the biggest benefit in reduction of heat stress for those cows. And this is a graph of this is internal body temperature. You'll notice that really it starts about 1 o'clock in the afternoon and really carries through until 11 o'clock in the evening. We see this huge difference in body temperature. This is in Celsius, but you see a big difference, especially around 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when that is the hottest part of the day, at least here in the upper Midwest. Biggest reduction in heat stress. Those cows were underneath the solar panels, getting out of the sun. It spiked a little bit here. This was milking time, so that's cows had to go back to the milking parlor, so they got a little hot when they had to walk. Um, so that was cows. The next question was, what do they eat under the panels? And so Sabrina here, this was her master's thesis. And so she looked at forage biomass and nutritive value of grasses and legumes grown under different uh, agrivoltaic sites. So we used a 30 kW site, a 50 kW site, and then had just kind of regular pasture to see how grasses and legumes grew underneath solar panels. And you could see we grew alfalfa, peas, fescue, orchard grass, clovers, and a bunch of mixtures to see how things grew. Well, what does it tell you? Well, actually, things grow well underneath solar panels. That's the big thing. And obviously, it depends on grass. Here, if you look at the mixtures, uh, grass alfalfa mix, grass red clover mix, they were actually higher underneath the solar panels. So we grew more forage underneath the solar panels than we did out in the open pasture for a couple of the mixtures. Orchard grass, meadow fescue, those grasses that were grown in monoculture alone had way more biomass underneath the solar panels than what they did in the open pasture. So we can grow good forages and probably more forages underneath the solar panels. If you want to look at forage quality, actually not much difference in forage quality. It's kind of uh, basically the forage quality is good underneath solar panels, no matter where you're growing it, as well as the digestibility. So we can grow a lot more forage. That's probably the biggest thing. High quality forage and a lot more of it underneath the solar panels without really compromising any forage quality at all. So where are we going to kind of go is the question with our agrivoltaics. And one of the things that based on our fixed system, we decided that we would build our own. So we built our own agrivoltaic system from a modified combine trailer that we used, and this was kind of a prototype. Does it lead to some other things that we're thinking about as far as agrivoltaics? Obviously, on a small scale. We're in the development stage trying to think about some of these things. This is 20 kW of portable shade for our cows. It has battery storage. You can see the battery boxes. The inverters are on the solar system. The cows don't bother it at all. It kind of folds up, and you can see that the cows are during the hot part of the day, they're underneath solar system. So we can produce energy for irrigation or powering fences or all kinds of different stuff and be able to use that uh, as a way to cool our cows. So these are bifacial panels that we use, and where this might lead us into the future of agrivoltaics, who knows? But it's a good concept of we can build portable shade systems with power. This is a picture of the battery boxes that we use. We also have an electric tractor that we can move. So this solar system will actually power the Monarch electric tractor that we have. We wanted to um, invest in electric vehicles as well. So we did that, and I'm trying to figure out this tractor is autonomous. So can I control it from my app to move my solar shade system while sitting in my office or somewhere else? We're going to find that out this summer, but that is the goal. So I can move my solar system without having to go out there and do it. If you want to know more about some of our solar projects, and we'll probably share these slides with people, but you can see solar farms and agriculture. This was a PBS program out of Minneapolis here that came out and looked at our solar on our research farm. And then we also went to some farmers that we're working with that are actually growing corn underneath solar panels that they've developed themselves. So that's in the program as well. So we're working with farmers that are growing corn underneath solar panels, and it can be done. And it's a unique way of doing it. So we're really exploring a lot of that as well. And if you want to know more about our mobile shade system, this program just came out on Monday evening. So, or sorry, Sunday, 2 nights ago. It's our solar shade system, gives you an idea of agrivoltaics and what that means, and you can see our system in use. So as I end here with the last couple minutes of time that I have, kind of these are my thoughts and where we're going. So this is kind of our myths versus reality. Uh, a lot of some people have heard me talk before. I will tell you the cattle are not going to wreck the solar panels. It just tractors and people will. I have yet to see cows wreck solar panels. We've had solar on our research center here for 10 plus years, and we have yet to see a cow jump on a panel, wreck the panels, or wreck any wires, or do anything what sort. So it's not going to happen. I think we need to think of the cow in mind when constructing solar farms. Um, if we're going to graze cattle under there, how do we have to build that? Yeah, I've talked to some solar developers as well that certainly are scared about putting cows underneath solar panels. Well, start small. I spoke at a conference this winter, and I think a solar developer was just going to go back and maybe put 20 cows underneath the solar panels just to see what would happen. I think that's where we're sort of seeing is believing if you just start out small. Just try it, and I think you'll be surprised. Obviously, working with the solar developers to do that is a big thing. And again, don't worry, they're not going to break it. I haven't seen it yet. These are kind of our opportunities. You can see our picture. This is in the winter time. So we utilize our solar system in the winter as well. We've outwintered. These are heifers in early February here on pasture. You can see they like to be underneath the solar panels even in the wintertime. Um, so these are kind of some of the concepts that I think about. Obviously, we want to build cattle tough structures. I don't think we need to go overboard, but obviously we want to think about the cow in mind, prioritize the animal safety, kind of smart layouts to prevent injuries that they have. Obviously, it's for shade. Solar is shade benefits for cattle, and that's what we see. Obviously, there's lots of liability that goes around. People are scared. How do you reduce financial risk if cows happen to wreck the panels? Who pays for that? Different things like that. I understand all of that, and there's risk that goes along with that. Obviously, we need more data to help debunk our myths with facts and build confidence. So my last slide here, this is kind of the future of agrivoltaics, at least for us and where we're going. Obviously, the height of the panels is something that we're continuing to explore, and I think Anna Clare will talk about some of that work that they have done. We're actually moving into some vertical bifacial panels. I've been out to Rutgers in New Jersey, and they have a vertical system where they're grazing cattle on, and we're going to try that at our research center too. Obviously on a small scale, but these are things that we want to think about as well. There's maybe other unique solar designs. Obviously, what kind of crops can we grow under the panels? Alfalfa, row crops, pasture, you name it. I'm exploring virtual fencing with solar panels. So you can put cows underneath the panels, maybe exclude some different areas that we have and just let them graze and use it from a virtual standpoint. And we need more long-term research and data that support that cattle don't wreck the panels. So with that, thank you for your attention, and we are grateful for the funding from the Minnesota legislature for a lot of these projects that we have. If you want to know more information, you can always contact me, and I'm glad to help anybody out with talking about solar and grazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad, for that presentation and giving us a rundown of agrivoltaics as we have developed them here in Minnesota. We do have a number of great questions in the chat, but we will save those towards the end after we have heard from Dr. Anna Clare. And so I'll have Dr. Anna Clare pull up her slides now, and I'll introduce her in a bit more detail as she's doing that. She is a rangeland ecosystem scientist, as I mentioned, synthesizer and collaborative facilitator. She offers state-of-the-science knowledge and practical engagement in agroecology, grazing management, rangeland science, agrivoltaics, and ecosystem services evaluation. She is a Colorado rancher and brings a unique skill set to land stewardship through livestock grazing. As mentioned, she's the founder of Graze LLC and the CEO of the Rangeland Living Laboratory. Anna Clare serves as the agrivoltaics research lead for a U.S. Department of Energy funded project. She's the grants leader for an agrivoltaic analytics studies project of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and the American Solar Grazing Association, and the agrivoltaics consultant for globally recognized the Nature Conservancy. So she brings to the field of agrivoltaics and solar industry a systems perspective. And this is where ecosystem stewardship is equally paramount to the production of renewable energy. We're excited to hear from Dr. Anna Clare, and take it away, Anna Clare.
Thank you. Thanks, Sabrina. And someone was asking for your introduction, so I'm gonna let you borrow a couple minutes. So please introduce yourself. You're worth talking about. So please do that.
Yes, I apologize. Yes, I forgot to introduce myself at the very beginning, but I am Sabrina Florentino. I am the Alternative Livestock Systems Extension Educator here with the University of Minnesota. And as Brad mentioned, I did do my master's research with him on agrivoltaics and growing forages under solar panels. And beyond that, am a livestock enthusiast, and so therefore am excited to bring this agrivoltaics webinar series to you all. So thanks, Anna Clare.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and thanks to University of Minnesota Extension for this really cool series and for the invitation to share what we're learning. I titled the presentation Research on the Solar Savanna, and this is a term that comes from one of my colleagues on this research project, Nick DeVries, and I'm gonna explain what this means. Let's see here. All right. So first, I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit less formally and say that I've been a fan of grassland ecosystems since pretty much I ever laid eyes on a horse, I think, was really when I fell in love with grasslands and all the herbivores and animals that inhabit them. And so in adult life, I get to work in grasslands every day. I dream about them. And so I get to work sometimes as a research scientist, sometimes as a consultant, as a kind of partner advisor to ranchers and landowners, large landowners. Mostly this is in the West. And I get to develop programs that support ranchers and all kinds of great things. And so the question is, what is she doing in energy? Where did she come from? So the reason why I'm working in energy as of the last few years is really these guys. And this herbivory cycle is really the foundation for what we're calling grazing agrivoltaics and why we're even considering this. And if you've heard me speak before, I'm really passionate about the fact that our solar sites, if they're going to be installed on grasslands, pasture lands, then we have the opportunity to really manage them as these whole ecosystems, these grazing systems where there are healthy soil microbiome and roots and nutrient cycling and pollinators, and of course our large herbivores that without them, we really don't have healthy grasslands. So this relationship between cattle, other large herbivores, zebra, wildebeest, bison, elk, deer. This relationship is really is as old as time, and there's no reason why we shouldn't really insist on managing solar sites that are built on grasslands as grazing lands, as rangelands. So here's where the savanna comes in. So if you picture a savanna, right, it's primarily grasslands with some trees, some shrubs. And if you transform this picture into a solar savanna, we can think of those shade structures of trees, these large trees, being in some way substituted by solar modules. We may take those wild herbivores and consider substituting in this kind of man-made system, domestic livestock, right? Sheep and cattle. And this is the metaphor, or really the concept of this solar savanna that we know there are very vast differences between solar panels and trees. I realize this. But if we think of them as modifying the shade and radiation dynamics of a pastured or a grassland system, and the interaction of herbivores with those structures, that canopy, in other words, then we do have some, commonalities that we can consider maybe positive, and some dynamics that are positive. And in fact, as Brad was talking about this has been going on with sheep. And so this is what it looks like. We have very, we can have very healthy, biodiverse grassland landscapes with large herbivores. And we can actually, and the research over the last 14-ish years is actually showing us that there is this symbiotic relationship that we can observe. And there are components of this that we're understanding. The sheep utilize the solar panels or cattle for shade, for example, and the grass actually may, depending on the grass species, may actually be more productive and have an advantage with the access to shade or with shade of the panels. The grass and the sheep have a relationship, and this is kind of the system that we're working in. But what happens here, right? We're pretty comfortable, I would say, in the United States and globally. We're nice and comfy with sheep, but what happens with cattle that are much larger, more massive, taller? Would that change, the balance here that we are finding pretty regularly in a sheep and solar system? And that is exactly what the project is looking at that I'm working on with Silicon Ranch. And this is the homepage of our website. So on this website, you can find lots more information on the project. Please visit it. And the project is called Cattle Tracker, and some of the comments in the chat were asking about tracking systems. And so I will, this is a project that is using tracking systems. I really just love the organic nature of the work that University of Minnesota and Brad's team has done, because it was just born out of this curiosity and the opportunity that was captured, right? Like you said, we just looked at how tall the cattle were. We thought they would fit, and that, you just start trying things. And I love that. And because of that work, that we reviewed very closely and we were able to look at in retrospect in terms of time, we were able to build our research design from that. So you've heard the cliche, standing on the shoulder of giants. Well, there are not very many giants on planet Earth that in the cattle agrivoltaics world, but I would call this team one of the giants that we were able to stand on the shoulders of and elevate, and do something different, and build upon the work that they did. So I want to recognize the team, because I'm here speaking and you're seeing my face, but there are many faces behind this work. Our research team is made up of a really diverse group that is it's international. It's a combination of scientists and students and engineers and ranchers, and it's men and women of different backgrounds and all kinds. So we are the science team, and then we're led and we're guided by this advisory committee from across the country, who really provide an expertise type of backbone. We can lean on these guys to review our work, to ask questions, to provide feedback, and lots of wisdom and experience. So shout out to our advisory committee. So we started this project, and it really was launched. The project was envisioned earlier, but it was really launched. We're in our third year now, so in 2020, the end of 2022. And one of our first tasks was to conduct a very comprehensive literature review, specifically on cattle agrivoltaics. Well, guess what? There was hardly anything other than the University of Minnesota's work, right? So we designed, worked on a literature review that really kind of branched out from just cattle and solar. And I'll explain that in a minute. But this is a publication that has gone through peer review. It is not published, but we are supposed to hear like literally any minute now for a publication date. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for this title and this work that's coming out in Earth's Future Journal of AGU. It's almost there. And so what this literature review did was looked at these intersections of what makes up an agrivoltaic grazing system. And the way we structured the literature review was to look at the intersections of livestock and solar, solar and land and livestock. So we drew from the animal sciences literature, from the rangeland science literature, from sheep and solar, because there's a little bit more literature out there on that, and then solar and land, so soil, forage, crops, all of those microclimatic kind of dynamics, including evapotranspiration and things like that. So we identified through this literature review all of these intersections. So just tons of complexity here. In those intersections of livestock, solar, and land, we have all of these subsections and connections across disciplines and across areas of study. And that is all housed and that's all surrounded by this context of society and policy and economics. And so there are also pieces of literature out there on that. So we integrated all of this into this giant literature review, and we came out with what we ended up doing with it was a gap analysis, because we wanted to, since this is a very nascent field, we wanted to help guide future research, right? So what's missing? What do we still really want to ask? What do we still really want to study? What do we need in order to expand, commercialize, cattle and solar? And so our gap analysis resulted in these 6 categories. And this is the first time this is ever being shared publicly, by the way. So it's exciting, and we hope this would be like something to come back to if you are in a research setting. So we identified that more research in just photovoltaics and livestock integrated systems. And I want to recognize also how our project is addressing these gaps. So we did the literature review, then we really develop and start to conduct a study that addresses the gaps. That was the whole point of the literature review. So in this PV livestock integration is our cattle tracker research. We also identified that there is a need for more layered ecological impacts. So not looking at myopic cause and effect, or like one dependent variable or one independent variable and one dependent variable, but having this kind of holistic or like layered understanding of ecological dynamics. And in fact, we are looking at this kind of multi-dimensional ecosystem research in Georgia and Tennessee, which is where our research is taking place. Biogeochemical and economic modeling is another area. Being able to make predictions based on a particular geographic context, for example. And we're working with the Decent biogeochemical model, and all of our data is going into the parameterization of a model that is tuned to an agrivoltaic system. Management best practices is another one. We are definitely using our work as a case study for understanding this and being able to provide learning on that. Social dimensions. We have part of our project is a stakeholder survey that we just got IRB approved, so it will be kind of officially launched and available. So if you keep touch with us on LinkedIn or on that website, you'll be able to participate in this survey. Understanding social opinions and perspectives on cattle, agrivoltaics, barriers, things like that. And then we identified that there's just a need for collaborative science. This is a very cross-disciplinary area. And we wanted to build a project that was a living model for this collaborative science. And not just that it's collaborative in terms that are different people are involved, but that it's truly cross-disciplinary, but also cross-sector, because that's what energy and agriculture is. Policy, economics, government, private, and we really want to cross those boundaries. That's the best way we can learn, and so that's what we set out to do. So our timeline it looks kind of like this for our research. So the x-axis is time. It's the number of years that our project is slated for. And here in the middle, this dotted yellow line is where we are now. The y-axis are those ecological layers that I talked about in that gap analysis and how we're addressing this. So we are really looking all the way from 50 centimeters below the soil surface all the way to 6 meters at the sensors mounted on an eddy covariance flux tower. So we're looking at this kind of micro atmospheric layer. We're looking at the vegetation layer. We're looking at the multiple layers of soil depths. And we're looking at different layered variables that all are correlated in some way that we're figuring out. So from the air, meaning, carbon dioxide, wind speed, wind flow, humidity, above and below the solar array, forage, soil, subsoil. We're also looking at economics and building a financial model for a cattle tracker, looking at animal behavior, and a lot of that we are building off of the work of Brad and his team. And so we're about in the middle. We've got a long ways to go, but that's where we are, just to give you an idea. And so in the cattle portion of the study, the cattle tracker portion, aside from the ecosystem dynamics portion, I kind of think of them in two different buckets sometimes. We're really looking at, how do we safely, humanely, regeneratively, like supporting land health, and profitably integrate cattle. So this is a little bit different than Brad's work. He called it demonstration, and that's so important. And it makes sense in the context of an educational institution. But the leader of our project is a solar developer company. It's a for-profit entity and a leader in research and demonstration, but in the kind of the utility side. So what we're really looking at all along the way is, how do we prove, or how do we make it make sense to scale this up, to commercialize it, to make it insurable, to make it bankable. And those are the things we continue to kind of ask, and those are the things that guide kind of what we're doing. So we're kind of looking at this being something, creating something and studying something that is scalable in all of those different dimensions. And so we're doing this in 2 phases. The first phase already happened. And this first phase was really looking at the different heights, right? So it's great to have the case studies and have the demonstrations that, okay, at an 8-foot torque tube height and a 6-foot leading edge height, the cattle are not wrecking the panels. That is a great anecdote, right? And to have that studied and to have that demonstrated for really the longest study that we have on that is this one. So we took that and thought, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And in fact, the rancher that we're working with, Mr. Will Harris of White Oak Pasture, said, yeah, the browse height, if you go out into the woods and look at where the cattle browse, the browse height is about, 7 feet. Anything taller than that is just not even going to be an issue. So we started asking, what is the range of heights that we want to test? And we really wanted to test this. And it also affects, different ambient kind of conditions for the cattle regarding airflow and humidity and like Brad was talking about, heat stress and things like that. And our lead scientist on this portion of the study actually did a not quite a meta-analysis, but the citation is here, and Lily Edwards Calloway has this really great tables and summary data on the literature thus far about shade structures in cattle and kind of how the different heights affect these aspects of cattle health and welfare. So we designed a trial, and the trial took place in pens. We needed to control the environment in order to zero in on height of the panels, right? So we studied 3 different heights: 2 meters, 2.5 meters, and 3 meters. This was a mock-up. So these panels were not electrified. There's no electricity running through anything, but we did create a very realistic scenario. So we had dampers, we had cables strung, we had real panels, real torque tubes, real I-beam piles. Everything was real, it just wasn't electrified. we made sure that it was designed to be fail safe. So in case the cattle did try to wreck a panel or try to ram into the I-beam or something, that it wouldn't come tumbling down and hurt the animals. We had to get this research approved by an IACUC review. And so we designed it to be safe in a test situation. So what we were interested in learning is, what is the frequency of physical engagement per height? What body part does the animal engage with? And 3, with what part of the module does the animal engage? And we tracked either, the module or the panel itself, the torque tube, the controller, the cable, the damper, the brackets, the piles. We looked at where they engaged, what were they curious about, what were they wanting to nose or lick or head scratch or whatever it was that they were doing. And then our fourth kind of variable was, with what intensity did they engage with the mock-ups? And here's an example of what this kind of looked like. And we used bulls. So we tested 144 bulls. Half of them were adult bulls and half of them were yearling bulls, and we classified them by weight. I think this was a group of yearling bulls, and they'll scratch, but you can see them also hanging out in the shade and pretty kind of not really interested in the panel. So what did we learn? We learned that there is a significant kind of inverse relationship, but direct, between the interaction frequency, so how much they engaged, and the height. And you can see that in the graph on the left. The lower the height, the higher the interaction frequency, and that's the y-axis. We also saw that there is a significant relationship between interaction frequency and the number of days in the pen. So we left groups of animals in the pens under the solar module mock-ups for 2 days. And what we saw was, in day 1, there was a lot more frequent engagement. They were exploring. It was like a honeymoon period, right? By day 2, they really didn't care. There was less. The frequency of engagement dropped off. They habituated. They just kind of got used to it being there, just like a shed or anything else that cattle have in their environments. There was a significant relationship between height and then the location on the animal that they engaged with. So in this lower right table, with the 2-meter height, they were much more engaged with their head or neck than the 2.5 or 3-meter height, if that makes sense. And then looking at the table on the top right, we see a couple things. We see that above 2 meters, we saw a significant reduction in interaction frequency by 43% if we went from a 2-meter height to a 2.5-meter height. We also saw that then the 3-meter height reduced the interaction by 59%. So this makes sense, but it's good to see the numbers. It's good to see the data, and to see also in this last bullet that even at a 2-meter height, at the lowest height that we tested, and this is lower than what's built at University of Minnesota by some feet, that the solar panels were never even touched. They were really engaged more with the dampers. And so if you're a solar engineer or a designer or someone looking at building something for cattle, I would look at the dampers and this is of course in a tracking system, because that was the part of the modules that they were the most engaged with. And those also happen to be kind of more delicate pieces of the structure. So something to consider. What are we doing next? We're doing phase 2. Let me check myself on time. Yeah, so we're doing phase 2. Phase 2 is a 4.5 megawatt solar installation. It's being built in Tennessee. It's being built as we speak. And hopefully that mock-up trial that you saw looking at 3 different heights, we will be replicating that study on this site, what we're calling an outdoor test lab, in December or so, November, December, kind of at the end of this year. This outdoor test lab is designed to be a research site. It's designed, it's going to be producing energy. The energy has an off-taker already. Everything is moving forward, but it is also, and everyone on board, all the collaboration knows that this is also a research site, and there will be ongoing research here. So I want to let you know too that it's kind of an important issue these days, but a very cool thing and something to consider if you're on the solar side of this is that the majority of all the components of this solar installation come from within 500 miles of the site. So it's domestic USA made content. And then that's just something that we're very proud of. And it's able to move forward. What are we going to study? What do we get to do now in phase 2? And so we have organized our research plan into 3 buckets. One is behavior, looking at activity time. 2 is behavior, looking at use of space. And 3 is health and performance. And so again, standing on the shoulder of giants. This did not just come out of nowhere. We reviewed literature, we looked at what other researchers had done, and we looked at our own context and our own questions and our own interests, and we melded all that together, and this is what we've come up with. So this is what we plan to study on the outdoor test lab. And using instrumentation similar to what Brad talked about and some other things. And we're really interested in how they interact with the space, what they do, where they spend time, and also in proximity to other animals. And this is all compared to this control. So you see how the site is divided into a control pasture and then the array. So we will have cattle in the control. It's just an open pasture. Same grasses, same kind of land, same soils and things like that. And then we'll have cattle simultaneously in the array. And so we'll be able to compare cattle in and out of the array. We will be using a rotational grazing system. This is the 3rd bullet here, where we'll develop subdivisions of the array. So a paddock kind of rotational grazing system, and we'll replicate that, but on a smaller scale in the control pasture. So as much as we can, apples to apples management and stocking density and things like that of the cattle, but we're just either they've got access to panels or they don't, basically. And then we'll be tracking all of these variables. In addition to that, we will be replicating all of our ecosystem dynamics research that we've been conducting for 2.5 years in Georgia. This is what that research design looks like, and it will be we'll use our control on the Tennessee site similarly to this bottom right-hand corner in the reference. So we have basically 3 comparisons. I'm not going to be able to spend time on this, and I've presented on it before, so if you've never seen any other presentations, I'm going to have to fly through this. But we basically are comparing mowed array to grazed array to a reference pasture that has no array on it. And in this part of the study, we are looking at plant species composition. We're looking at solar radiation, precipitation, soil moisture, soil temperature. We're looking at soil carbon, soil nitrogen, and we are learning some things. So I'm highlighting some things in yellow boxes. And some of the things that Brad was saying, we are seeing the same thing. So we're seeing higher soil moisture content under the panels versus between the panels. Soil temperature is consistently lower. This is supporting those cool season grasses like the orchard grass and things like the clover, the legumes that are going to do well in that situation. So let's see here. We're also looking at soil carbon. We're looking at biomass as well. And we're also looking at regrowth rates. So what happens after the cattle do a grazing pass? does the grass regrow at a faster rate in the paneled system or in the open pasture? Is there a difference in regrowth or recovery of forage after a grazing event, for example? And we, in our, after 2 years of continuous data, we are learning things. That's pretty exciting. Sorry to have to fly through. We're using all of this data to parameterize a biogeochemical model. Again, this will continue on in the outdoor test lab with cattle. So this study, this ecosystem dynamic study that I'm giving a little review on, is a sheep system. We will then add that fourth kind of semi-comparison with cattle, same research methods actually, but looking at a cattle system. So model parameterization, what this means quickly is that we take our data, our field data, where we're using different instruments that are testing, measuring soil moisture and temperature and all kinds of microclimate information, as well as this kind of biomass fluctuation when there's grazing events and such. And we're calibrating basically a model to predict in a way that we are seeing on the ground. And so in this slide, you see that our actual field measurements are in red. The model simulation is in blue. And you see that we are getting close. We are very close. The simulation of the model is very well predictive of what we actually see in our field measures in this system of agrivoltaics. So just wanted to make sure that's understood. And thank you so much for the time. It's always hard to keep something like this in a 30-minute presentation, but I'm happy. Now we have 25 minutes or so. Happy to answer questions in tandem with Brad. I have not been looking at the chat during this half hour, so let us know.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Anna Clare, for that wonderful presentation, giving us some insights into the gaps in the literature and the innovative research your team is working on. We're excited to hear more as those results continue to be shared and your research is ongoing. We do have a number of questions that we've collected in the chat. I think we'll pivot back to Brad for a second. There was some questions about specifications on those solar systems here in Minnesota. Brad, I don't know if you've read them or not, but some of the audience has been interested in, I guess, again, the costs of raising panels and then some items like, does the racking need to be ballasted due to the cows, or is it possible to be ground mount? What's the height of the axle? I believe that was for the 30 kW. And does the system include any underground cab system? So just some specifications on our demonstration AV sites.
A good question. As far as the cost, when it's about $3 a watt is what the cost is. It's kind of hovered around that for the last number of years. At least that's what we have done with our solar systems. So the 30 kW system, I believe, total cost with everything was about $86,000. That's with the pilings, the concrete, everything. So a little bit less than $3 a watt. At the time when we put those panels up, the cost wasn't greater for raising the panels. And this was 7-8 years ago. Obviously today there's probably some increased cost if you're thinking about increased steel, etc. There may be a little cost increase. However, we've kind of done some calculations and we're over the 20-25 year lifespan of the solar system. We don't think that the solar, by raising it up 8 feet off the ground, the cost difference is pretty meaningless, really, in the long-term plans of it. So not to say that we are exploring tracking systems, things like that. I'm not convinced anymore myself that the panels need to be at 8 feet. I think they could be 6. I have a ground mount system I didn't show in the picture, but I'm going to put some, it's, the leading edge is a foot off the ground or 2 feet off the ground. I'm going to put some heifers underneath those just to see what would happen. The problem is it doesn't cast a big shade system if it's a ground mount fixed system. So we're gonna test that out. The other question was, did the racking system need to be ballasted? No, we didn't. It's the racking system from the top was, I think it was an extra couple feet up from the panels, but no, there wasn't any extra infrastructure that we did just for the racking system. I guess, yeah, the height of the axle was about, at least from the 30K, about 10 feet off the ground.
Brad, could you share what the power is used for from those systems?
The power is used, like I talked about, to charge your electric car if you want. So that helps. But it powers our dairy. So we have a goal of having our dairy farm be net zero. And so the energy goes for use in our dairy, because milking cows takes a lot of energy. So we utilize all of the energy. The panels are hooked to the grid, but we don't send any power to the grid. We utilize all of it ourselves. It's behind the meter.
Then there was a question here about rotational grazing. How does that affect the fixed panels, or could the panels act as a fence? Maybe both of you could weigh in on that question.
Well, great. Go ahead, Empire.
Go ahead with the fixed system first, maybe.
I think with rotational grazing, you have to be careful that the cows are not under there constantly. We also provide a lot more area for the cows. So if they want to be underneath the solar panels, they can. If they want to go graze, they can do that as well. At least with our 30 kW system, that's maybe a half an acre, but we allow them to have 3 or 4 acres. So the cows can roam around. We don't have the water close by. They go graze other places. So they're free to roam where they want, really. But just you have to remember, you probably don't want them confined enough where they spend 24 hours a day under the panel. That would be probably disastrous, like the one picture that I showed you.
But also, like your picture, it's important that there's recovery time, right? And that's I believe is the number one key to rotational grazing is adequate recovery. You can graze something pretty hard. You can even make it look like dirt on the surface. But if you allow the perennial grassland system recovery and there's precipitation of some kind, then you're gonna be fine. And so in our situation, what we're planning, and another kind of rule of thumb that I like to follow is in a rotational grazing system, you really, in most contexts, this is all just so context dependent, but you want at least 10 rotations, and there's some math to this. I'm not going to go into it, but let's say there's 10 rotations. If you spend 3 days in each paddock, and then you don't return to paddock A for 30 days, which is plenty of time in most contexts for there to be some recovery. If there's precip and warm enough temperatures that grass is going to grow back. So with the tracking system, depending on your height, you could, and people have talked about this, and we'll be coming out with some information on this. Silicon Ranch and the project will be coming out with some PR on this, but you really have the option of letting everything continue to track, right, if they're high enough off the ground, or to stow the panels in the area where the cattle happen to be in that paddock, right, in that portion. More information, really cool information, is forthcoming from our project on that, because there's actually an operational system patented for this now. And so that I'm not going to spoil it, but it's coming. So there are options. The idea, though, I think really the key is recovery. So if you're moving cattle on and allowing rest for under the panels, or if there's inclement weather, you know, there could be all kinds of reasons why things start to look pretty grazed down or pretty impacted. Give it recovery, move them off, wait before you move them back on until those plants fully recover.
So we touched a little bit about maintenance of our land and of the vegetation. Could each of you discuss any, if you know, the details of maintenance of these solar panels themselves on any of the systems that you've worked with? What has that looked like over time, and how that might affect our livestock?
Mine's a simple answer: zero maintenance, zero. With the solar system, no maintenance at all, none.
From what I understand, same. There's not any extra maintenance, that's for sure. And what is actually coming out in a report this year that I worked on with for the American Solar Grazing Association is that there is some case study evidence that you actually have less panel damage in when there's grazing used as vegetation management rather than lawnmowers. So there's more of a chance of damaged panels throwing rocks and stones and whatnot, and panels getting damaged in a mowed system than a grazed system. Some people worry about dust. I don't know if this question had to do with dust, but if you have healthy live vegetation under the panels and it's not gravel and bare ground, um, then you're not going to have any increased reason to mitigate dust on the panels either. If anyone wants to come off mic too and just ask a question or speak up, you don't have to only go through the chat. You're welcome to join kind of discussion style too.
Yes, there was also a question about material for infrastructure that was cost effective. Any preferences there?
About the material cost for it, I don't know. It took us a little bit to figure out where to get the materials. At least 7, 8 years ago, when we were starting to do that, it took some time to figure that out. It wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. But now it's pretty easy. Our current installation, the half a megawatt that went up, that was not difficult to find at all. And the racking systems are better.
That's not my area of expertise, but if anybody from my team wants to speak up about sourcing materials, I know domestic sourcing would be ideal anyway and anytime, but that's not the area that I can speak about.
So going back to our flies on cows under panels, there's a question about dung beetles and someone studying them. Did you see less flies? Could you reiterate that point, Brad, under the panels or not?
Yeah, that's a good question. Especially with the dung beetles. Well, I'll answer the fly question. We didn't see less flies on cows that were under the panels. We didn't find any big difference. There was maybe a numerically difference that the flies were more underneath the panels because the cows were staying underneath the panels more. So the flies are going to congregate there probably more if the cows are underneath the solar panels. The question on dung beetles, do we see dung getting concentrated near the panels? Yeah, if they're under there a long time, if they're staying there for a few hours even, they're gonna manure and defecate underneath the panels more so than they will anywhere else. So that could potentially, it's hard to tell whether that is beneficial to dung beetles because there's a lot of manure there, or will it harm and not have as many dung beetles there because the cows are stomping it into the ground and dispersing the manure. I'm not sure how the dung beetles will like coming underneath the solar panels if the manure is kind of dispersed all over the place. So it's an interesting question, and I hope you figure that out because it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about manure, like looking at manure dispersion across the solar array. We had the same kind of inquiry, like, are they pooping more under or between or along the drip edges? Like, where are they where is that happening? And is it interacting with, forage quality and biomass and, the fertilization basically effect? And so we looked at we were like, okay, well, how would we do this? How would we actually study this? So we did pilot a method that we modified from some literature on tracking deer kind of activity and concentration. And we basically looked at, and this is with sheep, so this might be a little easier with cattle actually, because sheep kind of trickle the manure, and it's hard to imagine the mass of it. But we looked at kind of like small or large amounts of sheep manure deposits, and we looked at we created transects that were parallel to the rows of panels. So we looked at like this between the panel zone where we're getting a lot of sun and not a lot of shade. We looked at the drip edges of the tracking panels, and we literally just paced the transect and noted on a piece of paper how many times we saw manure and was it small deposit or a large deposit. And then we looked at directly under the torque tubes. This is not a published method. We just kind of wanted to see what the data would look like if we did our best. And there is could have been some, if we did more, had a bigger sample size, it looked like there could have been some patterns that might emerge from that. So go for it. Let's do it. Let's look at, manure deposition and the distribution of that on solar. And that's actually something I didn't even think about it, but maybe we could add that to our outdoor test lab research plan, because that is something of interest. So that's manure distribution, but then why not just flip it over and count dung beetle, density or some way to rank dung beetle activity in the paddies. So very interesting. I love it. And someone's going to do it. Maybe we'll do it. But I like that question because that is such a sign of that, soil, plant, animal health, right? That whole system.
So then we did have a question about funding. Brad, as you mentioned, the Minnesota legislature provided funding. And so could you just say a little bit more about that? And if either of you have any insights on other loans, grants, property taxes, things like that.
Well, the funding from our projects came through the Environmental Natural Resources Trust Fund, which is legislative money. It's basically lottery dollars. So if you play the lottery in Minnesota, a portion of that goes into a trust fund that funds environmental projects. It's very unique in our state. It's wonderful. And we've been very gracious to get funding for multiple agrivoltaics projects out of that fund. So that's where a lot of that has come from. If you think about, there's lots of other places to get funding, Department of Energy, USDA. There's a lot of different grant programs and things like that where you can possibly get funding for this type of work, whether it's research or demonstration aspects.
Anything to add, Anna Claire?
Yeah, our work is funded, this particular research project directly through the Department of Energy CETO office, Solar Energy Technologies office. Other laboratories of the DOE also have grants periodically available. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Colorado. And I know there are there are some state organizations like NYSERDA in New York would be one that provides grants, and it's a state by state thing, but in terms of more kind of federal level, the DOE and its laboratories would be the source, a good source.
Perfect. I think we're, getting through most of the questions, unless there's any that I've missed or any additional comments you all would like to add. And to the audience, this is your last chance to throw something in the chat if you have one last burning question.
Well, I have a comment. There was a question about the advantage of the movable solar system that we have. I think our goal was to see if we could develop a system that would allow us to sort of reduce heat stress every single day of the year, as well as use it for a windbreak in the wintertime. And we did that this winter. We actually put it up. It's very windy in western Minnesota and can be snowy. We can have lots of blizzards. So our goal was to also see how well that worked in a wintertime setting. So can we use solar to sort of disperse the wind, those type of things aspect. I think it's interesting. I was at the Solar Farm Summit this past summer, and there was a poster there that I'm not sure, I can't remember who it was, but one of the ideas was to have multiple ones of these solar systems across the landscape, so you could move them and you could have portable power, or they could be tied to the grid somehow like that. You'd have less infrastructure. So that kind of fits with that topic. But our goal was to have portable off-grid power for a farm. You could say probably you're not going to put 4 to 5 megawatts of those things up, but this could be a smaller system for farmers to get into the solar realm.
There is also a question about it was to the host privately, I think, but I think maybe we can address it if that person's still there, about if we still kind of advocate for solar built on barn rooftops and things like that. And any kind of way that renewable energy can be used to offset fossil fuel-based energy in any situation, I think is a good one. And in no way, I don't think any of us are saying, building solar on pastures is like a replacement for any kind of rooftop. But from what we're understanding from the definition of agrivoltaics, when solar is built on rooftops on a farm, but it's built just on the roof of something, it's not really agrivoltaics, right? Agrivoltaics is really this integrated system where there's like value coming out of energy production and agricultural production and good land management, land stewardship. So yes, while like if you can offset energy use by installing solar on the top of the barn, beautiful. But it's just not apples and apples, I guess, is what I'm saying. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
I agree that I think you said agrivoltaics is the dual use of land and agriculture, and I'm not opposed to putting them on the barns. We have some on our barns. We just have explored lots of different ways that we can not take up valuable farmland and get 1, 2, 3, 4 uses out of it.
Thank you both. There is just one last question. Maybe you could reiterate in the chat about our vertical bifacial systems, what our plans are to investigate into those.
Well, that's a good question. I think we're going to explore vertical bifacial. Like I said, I saw one at Rutgers. We have a current project in that is funded where we'll put up a vertical bifacial system here at our research center, albeit on a small scale, to kind of answer some of the questions that people are asking. Does it make sense? How much power can we generate? Can we grow crops there? Can we grow can we put cows near it? Things like that. I have shouldn't give away my ideas. The idea is to put wine grapes in vertical systems, things like that. So I think the sky is the limit there. I think we're very used to having single axis tracking systems, and a lot of people have told me, oh well, the vertical system, it's worthless, you're wasting your time. Well, I guess if I figure that out, then I figure that out. I'm here in the research business to figure those questions out, and that's why we're going to a vertical system as well to really test it out and see what's going to happen. It may be good, it may not be. Well, kind of doing what we did with some of the other systems. We're gonna go into it blind and figure it out.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're not going to do any work. Our projects, as it stands now, is not going to do any work with vertical systems, but definitely tracking and potentially by facial tracking. So that's something also. But there has been some case studies done in Colorado with vertical systems, and with wind erosion and snow and things, like they can not just dual use, but like if they can be a shield for preventing drifting of snow into a road or into an area where cattle or livestock are needing to be. And so that is also to me interesting, at the vertical system, to think of it that way as well.
Well, thank you both for sharing your exciting and innovative research and ideas and being willing to share with our audience and answer their questions. I give you an opportunity for your closing thoughts here, and we'll wrap it up then.
No, thanks for everybody for attending, and I think there's a lot of good things happening in a lot of different groups to try and figure this cattle grazing thing out. And I think all of our research will probably ask way more questions once we've figured it out than the answers that we will get. But that's a good thing too.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that we need all of it, right? All the different questions and curiosities. And there are folks out there who are just doing it, right? They're just going to do it. And without the research maybe beforehand, which is okay. And that we're going to learn from that too, right? We're going to learn from the bold and the risk takers. But we also, need to be able to have data to show to insurance companies, and it's very multidimensional, and I think that all of the different ways that people are trying to move this forward is worthy, and it's going to take the village of everyone looking at it together. So I appreciate the opportunity to share and kind of spread the word here today. So thank you again.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Heins and Dr. Monlezun. As I said, this is a series, so we will be having another webinar in May, May 20th, on sheep solar grazing with a producer panel. So we will hear from sheep farmers who are grazing underneath panels, and then be on the lookout for more information on a field day here in Minnesota at the West Central Research and Outreach Center in June on the 27th. So I did put those registrations in the chat if you're interested. And again, we thank you all for joining, and hope that this webinar was of use to you and answered some questions and maybe created more. But thank you all and have a good evening.